Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. As you may know, I am Tom Chapman, and I am the CEO of Peeq Pro. Peeq Pro was created by two optometrists. They were seeking a better way to clean eyelids because eyelids are gross. To that end, they have helped create a novel device that can be used in a variety of at-home ways, including to remove cosmetics and to help improve a patient's eyelid hygiene. One way that many people use the Wava is to help combat dry eye. So we at Peeq Pro talk to and with a lot of optometrists with work in the dry eye space. And overwhelmingly, these leaders point to our guest tonight, Dr. Todd Cohan. He is a leading thinker and practitioner in the dry eye space. We asked if he would join us and share some of his wisdom about dry eye and kind of how he practices. So welcome, Todd.
Thank you so much.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice?
Sure. I was a 2001 graduate of ICO. I have two practices in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. We opened up our Midwest Dry Eye Center several years ago, and we do, comprehensive medical eye care. I have 3 associates, all the latest and greatest technology, and we're all about quality over quantity. And we may not be seeing 5,000 eye exams, but the 2,500 eye exams we see a year are very well treated with orthokeratology, myopia management, as well as dry eye are the pillars that we always want to continue to build every single year. The last 17 years I've owned my practice.
Cool. So I tend not to ask a lot of technical questions. Other people will probably ask technical eye questions. So I'm going to ask a business structure question to get us started. You have 2 businesses. They're in the same place. Why did you structure it that way? How has that worked positively? Are there any negatives?
All right, so we opened up the Midwest Dry Center going on a little over 9 years ago. And the reason why we did the co-branding of Midwest Dry Eye Center is because I wanted to get over the hurdles of our colleagues. Very oftentimes, there's a lot of quote unquote fear of referring your patients to another optical office or when they walk in and they see that. So what I did is I established a separate website, separate Facebook group page, separate phone number, all the different separate referral, like when the patients book an appointment, it's in the Midwest Dry Center column. And so what it does is it has all the paperwork, the referral letters are all branded Midwest Dry Eye Center. And so that really is no problem of Midwest Dry Eye Center brochures sitting in a lot of our referring doctors' practices, commercial and otherwise. Whereas if it was our main office, Foresight Vision, it would be confusing for the patients. And I guarantee you the referring doctors wouldn't be as apt to do it just by the semantics of everything.
Interesting. And do you have a number of referring doctors? So you're in one of the suburbs of Chicago. Do people come from all over the Chicagoland area? Is it mostly kind of geographic, or how do people find you from a reference perspective? Just doctors, other ways?
I mean, by and large, we'd like to have lots more referring doctors sending us patients with more regularity. But we have some relationships with some oculoplastic surgeons in the area. We have some really strong relationships with some big cataract surgeons in our area, and really emphasized, it took a lot of work, how important it is to stabilize the ocular surface prior to their final measurements. And when you kind of put it in their perspective, like, look, Dr. So-and-so, 40% of measurements are incorrect according to the Dr. Matosian study if you don't address the ocular surface and by at least doing LipiFlow or something beforehand. So it's really important that, the last thing an ophthalmologist wants to do is cut twice. They want to measure twice and cut once. And so we use that a lot, and we've worked with that. And a lot of the commercial doctors, we've really done a lot of good job with getting in with them. My associate is quite younger than I am, and she's got more closer boots to the ground with the commercial docs. And we even have a doctor of provision that refers OCTs. Like every week, we've got 2 or 3 patients coming in for OCTs. We just charge the patient the technical component, and they do the interpretation and report. But she'd much rather to send us, get them in, get them out for a glaucoma screen with an OCT. She doesn't have it. So those types of relationships. But a lot of times we have patients driving. Our Google SEO is really good for our Midwest Dry Eye stuff. And there's plenty of doctors that do dry eye. There's not a lot that market it the same way. And we're constantly working on those types of ways to reach out. And we have patients that drive from Milwaukee and people that drive from Peoria, which is like 2.5 hours away. And how'd you find us? Google. And they're driving through downtown Chicago, and there's plenty of academic institutions and doctors that, are great doctors that may not be approaching dry eye the same way that they should be, or that we are on the newer technology. And we have everything in our office to provide that care.
That's really interesting. I have like 3 questions. So I'm going to tell you what they are, and then I'm going to go in the order that it seems most relevant for what we talked about ahead of time. So the first question is, you talked a little bit about the 40% stability of the ocular surface, that 40% of the patients don't have that. That's really interesting to me. Second thing is, you talked about SEO and Google, also really interested to me. But the third thing is, you talked about your equipment. You mentioned it a couple times, and I wanted to go to that question because I think it's a question I get most frequently, which is about, you have equipment in your office, you're like, best, newest technologies, etc. You've been doing this for 9 years. How have you evolved your equipment? How did you start in 2016? And then how did you grow into what you have? Like, what have been the changes? And talk a little bit about the equipment you have now, as well as how you started.
Okay, I'll start with the equipment question. I've been very fortunate to be part of a big cohort of my study group that we started 15 years ago. And one of the people is out west, and he was one of the first early adopters of LipiFlow. And so we actually got to meet with Donald Korb, the creator of LipiFlow, the founder of Tier Science. And we got to sit down with him. And actually from that meeting out in Seattle, Tom, we had 5 of us in our group purchase LipiFlows from there. So that was really the impetus to get going. I heard his successes, and I said, you know what, this is a need. Our patients, we need some tools in our toolbox to help patients. And we just have grown exponentially. I'm one of the top 10 LipiFlow accounts in the country based upon volume, because we believe so strongly and have had it. Now, we've had that for going on, since the inception of our Midwest Dry Center 9 years ago. Also, we do myographies on every single patient with the Oculus Cartograph and so on and so forth. But since then, our evolution, that's a great question. So about 3 years ago, we brought in a radio frequency device. It's always like, you wish you bought the MacBook this year versus last year. It was cheaper and better this year than last year. But you always you gotta jump in the deep end at some point. So we bought a really expensive, probably the cost of a Tesla, radio frequency device. And I really put it onto my associate. I really wanted her to grow. And I said, you know what? You do all the research, talk to leaders in the country. We talked to ophthalmology. We talked to, industry leaders in the dry eye space with radio frequency in this situation. And we got our protocols down. We met with them on Zoom and really got everything down. And I really incentivized my associate. I said, okay, whatever we build, we'll kind of revenue share it, right? So she was already on a salary plus production, but we gave her an extra production, bonus based upon taking this on. She overtook the staff training with it. She really ran with it, and that was a huge success. And we paid that machine off, or at least we, made enough revenue from it in like 10 months to pay for it. So we really made it successful. And that's unfortunately where a lot of our colleagues just, they'll buy the shiny box at the meetings, but they don't have the implementation. And that's why I formed a company to really help with implementation with our fellow practitioners, because it's one thing to buy it, but it's not going to be a money tree you plant in your backyard. It's not going to work for you unless you tell it how to work and have a system in place with our staff and our training, and why we're bringing this expensive machine in, and how we're bringing the level of care increasing continually with our staff and our patients. So and then we've kind of then a year and a half ago, we brought in IRPL, Intense Regulated Pulse Light. It's a great machine, and also has another type of dry eye evaluation machine too, which was perfect. I put it in my new practice I bought a year ago, so that worked out well. And those are transportable. We can bring them both back and forth. But like anything else, you got to have the right staff in place. So yeah, that's kind of how our evolution of our machines work. But I did a lot of research. We got our protocols down, and we found out what we wanted to purchase at that time. If you asked me today, would I buy something different? Of course I would, but we have what we have with us, and technology, now these combo units and things like that, which are wonderful. But I'm not going to trade in my existing machine that I've paid off and it's working well. So yeah.
Makes total sense. We did get a question. It's around sort of the Google SEO stuff that you mentioned. The question is, what's the best way for practices to take advantage of SEO and search marketing in their area? Should they work with an agency familiar with optometrists, local SEO expert with brick and mortar experience? How did you do it?
I mean, what we did is, to be honest with you, we were working with one of our website vendors, and I said, this is what I want to do. And, I pay 2 big monthly fees a month for the Midwest Eye Center website and our regular office website. And they do their magic, and we do Google AdWords, and we look at trends in terms of what's trending, what people are looking for, and we try to hit those things. They're doing the posts for us, but I'm a firm believer. I mean, whether it's our recall system or different specialists, I pay for professionals that know those particular portions of the practice better than I do. I mean, we don't have our staff do recalls. We have a company that does recalls for us. So not old postcards. They do phone calls and appointments and pre-setting, and we have different companies. So our website people really they have an SEO division. And look, I mean, if I'm dropping an extra $300 to $500 a month, I mean, to be honest, that's less than the cost of one patient. I mean, really, I mean, when an average dry eye patient generates minimum, anywhere to $2 to $3 grand annually, it's a no-brainer. So yeah, I'd rather be seeing those types of patients all day long, just like, a lot of myopia management patients and a lot of our fellow practitioners do. I'd rather see one of those patients for every 5 vision plan patients all day, every day.
Yeah, that makes good sense. All right, so I think we've handled that. I want to go back to how you talk to ophthalmologists. So you
Sure.
mentioned that you've done a good job of getting surgeons to be referending doctors. I think it's one of the areas that many optometrists express discomfort, where they're basically like, I don't really like talking to the ophthalmologist or the surgeon, or I'm afraid they're going to take my patients, or fill in 15 different things. How did you go about doing it? And you said you've made slow but steady progress to improve the relationship.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the low-hanging fruit, right? I mean, we've been trying so hard, and the way the medical system is these days, they're having to see, more people in less time, more reimbursement. It's become everybody's an RVU, right? How much relative patient value do they have in all these hospital systems, and big corporate America's taking over the hospital system? So the quality of care is just going down the tubes. And we have people that come from Northwestern and Rush, all the big downtown places, and they've never even seen a picture of what their glands look like. I'm like, you've been seeing this cornea guy downtown in Northwestern? He's never showed you your glands? Like, give me a break. But that's not they're just trying to get you into surgery. So, but the question was about the ophthalmology. So the low-hanging, like we've tried with rheumatologists and dermatologists and all these things. My own dermatologist, where my kids go to, I mean, they ruined some kids' glands because of Accutane. And I, went over there, stomping over there and dropped stuff off and did this. And it's barely. If I get one patient a month, it's a lot. And they're seeing hundreds a day. So that's extremely frustrating. But we've had a lot of success with oculoplastic surgeons, right? Plastic surgeons, because they're not a non-competing space, right? Some are ophthalmologists, some aren't. But their mode of practice now, Tom, is mainly they just want to do surgeries. They don't want to do chalazion removals. They want to do $5,000 eye lifts, brow lifts, face lifts, you name it. So they want to do those types of things. And so when you can meet with them and say, hey, I'm going to refer you patients. So scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But the big thing, they don't want anything messing with their surgery schedule. They don't want it, right? They want to come in on a Tuesday and, do 50 blepharoplasties and drive off in their Porsche on their way home. That's what they want. They don't want problematic patients. And when you can show them what a blepharoplasty does to the ocular surface when you shorten the eyelids, and if these people are having any type of dry eye symptoms ahead of time, it's like gas with on fire. I mean, these people are so symptomatic. And so if you can get them to treat, and the importance of at least send them to your office for a screening ahead of time, or at least do a mybography for them ahead of time, get an idea. And we all know that, mybographies don't tell the whole story. It's a starting point, but you got to look at how the glands are functioning also. But that will help with their lack of headaches with problematic patients. I mean, over the years, I'm sure, a lot of the people on this call can attest that we've all had patients that their eyelids got shortened, and all these people now they're sleeping with masks at night, and their eyes are so dry from exposure, and their dry eye is just a mess. And, they're on a kitchen sink of lubricants and drops and this and that, and it's still barely covering their bases and causing discomfort. So oculoplastics is good. Plastic surgeons is good, as well as the ophthalmology. So if you can pull up the studies, I mean, they can't argue with this. The Cynthia Matosian study that was one of the pinnacles of lipoflow and tear science showed that 40% of measurements are incorrect. I mean, she's a huge ophthalmologist on the East Coast of the country, and she showed that, you can Google it and pull it up. I printed it off in color with our logo and everything and dropped them off in offices and emailed them to the doctors, because really, they don't want to, like I said earlier, they want their most precise measurements. And now when a lot of these ophthalmologists are chasing the premium lenses for higher out-of-pocket, cost by the patient to make more money for their practice and stuff, is that they want the most precise things. And there's one ophthalmologist we work with, we just go in and might go do lipoflows once a week for all these premium IOL, ICL patients, SMILE patients, because they've done a really, really good job of instituting the importance of it. And so yeah, that's a really easy thing to do. And to get over the, I don't think they're going to steal your patients. I mean, look, people are seeking them out. I mean, the average patient, it was an article I read a while ago, goes to 3.2 eye doctors before they find the right dry eye specialist. So that should be telling you something. So if you can be that stop for the patient and emphasize what you've invested in your practice to these referring ophthalmologists, there's no reason why they shouldn't work with you. We're still working with other kind of naturopathic doctors. I mean, there's so much people you could work with dry eye, but it's really, you got to get boots on the ground. And, I want to bang my head against the wall with my own family's pediatrician, dermatologist, because it just drives you nuts. I mean, a lot of us on the call can probably say the same thing about myopia management with pediatricians, right? You got to keep banging on the door until they answer. So.
Fair. Are there any questions from the group before I kind of move along? I am going to get into dry eye protocols next. So I see no hands, so I'm going to go ahead and say, so the question that I wrote to you is, do you have a specific dry eye protocol? And you've already answered that question. So you've already said, yes, we have a dry eye protocol. It's been created over time, etc. So I'm going to ask a slightly different question, but related. When you were first starting, how did you create it? And then how has it evolved? And what are the sorts of things that cause you to evolve your process?
So when we first started, we followed kind of the tier science. I was blessed to have the national trainer of lipoflow as as my local field rep. So I was just bam, successful off the bat with that thing. We did a launch event for lipoflow. We had a cosmetology student giving hand and scalp massages. The first night we did 14 lipoflows, and we built up the demand and almost paid for the machine the first night. It was pretty awesome. But our protocols to that was that we followed the protocol. So we did an ocular surface exam. We did the non-invasive tear breakup time. We did the staining the gland function. And then because Inflammidry wasn't around back then. And then what we did is then we saw them 8 weeks later, right? And so 8 weeks later, we'd say, hey, take a look behind the microscope. I've had slit lamp cameras in all my exam rooms since I opened 17 years ago, which still boggles my mind where most of our practitioners don't have slit lamp cameras in every exam room, because the picture says 1,000 words, and monitoring and tracking and documenting and this stuff is great. Because a lot, I learned the hard way, Tom, to be honest with you, that, I said, oh, this will cure your dry eye and so on and so forth. And you learn from your mistakes, because you'd have patients coming back 8 weeks later, but I don't feel any different. I spent X amount of money and I don't feel any different. And so then, you work with patients and we learn the verbiage saying, look, this gets your glands working, and it makes your gland function better. You may not necessarily see or feel an improvement. We can see it behind the microscope. We can see your tears lasting longer in your eyes, and so on and so forth. So, and a lot of that, as it evolved, a lot of it, we started doing ocular hygiene. And ocular hygiene, we got to address the ocular surface and say, look, tell patients that, look, just like your dentist brushes and flosses, tells you to brush and floss, it's no different. And people kind of laugh when they first heard of ocular hygiene. We were out in Vision Expo West, God, years ago. I mean, I don't even know how long time ago. And we got the BluffX, right? And I got all my staff. We firmly believe in staff education, and it's not cheap, but we always go to a conference every single year for 3 days, all expense paid. And so I got all my staff trained to be ocular hygienists, right? And so they all have certificates and so on and so forth. And they all did BluffX, right? And so then we started talking about BluffX and how it's important to reduce the bacterial load on your eyelids and how that leads to inflammation. And again, you've got to have the slit lamp cameras to show, like, people are like, ugh, look at that. Or, the patients that have Demodex and we're using the Peeq system and using the different hyperchlorous sprays and things like that to help with that. And you really have to educate patients on how that all leads into it. Like, it is called dry eye disease. And again, this is all stuff I've learned because it doesn't go away. You're not stopping your antihistamine. You're not stopping your antidepressants. You live in an environment where it's cold, in the Midwest, cold in the winter and dry and arid and not a lot of humidity, and the allergies in the spring. And those are all things that work. And yesterday I saw a patient for a follow-up, and she's like, "Can I please have a radio frequency touch-up? Because my eyes have been bugging me." I'm like, "Sure, why not? You can do it, right? Sure, give me the buddy." But she feels so good from it. And actually, she was having a flare up because of her allergies. It wasn't like, yes, it mimics dry eye symptoms, but she's having more of an ocular issue with her because of the allergies, but she wanted to do that. I'm like, okay, cool. And she's on her every 6 months. She's a high school teacher. She comes in every 6 months for IRPL touch-up and alternates every 3 months, on the off 3 months for the radio frequency. And, she's great. She's not on any more prescription eye drops or anything like that. So that's kind of helped with our protocol and talking to industry experts and, a lot of my colleagues too.
This is a slightly different question. All right. So we tend to have two different types of customer groups. So we get questions like, "I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me start." And then we get people that are like, "I really know what I'm doing. Please help me improve a little bit." So if you could give one subtle hint as an expert to somebody that's been doing this for 4 or 5 years, has the equipment, what is one thing that you would say most people just miss, but it has a huge impact? Or even a small
I
impact?
would say, yeah, that's a great point. And so for our experienced colleagues, I would really say, get your system in place in terms of your follow-up protocols. Make sure everyone in the office is attuned to what you want to do when you want to see those patients back, because these patients really appreciate the time and energy and the technology you've implemented in your practice. But you have to make sure that, things are so crazy in our office. Like, you see a dry follow-up and this, but put a system in place knowing that, hey, when Tom was here in March, he finished his treatments. Let's make sure we schedule his next touch-up IRPL in September. Let's make sure we do that before he walks out the door. Make sure that you have protocols. Okay, this is what you're doing here, this is what you're doing here, this is what you're doing here. Make sure you have all that and pre-schedule appointments and implement those types of things, because selling products in your office is wonderful. There's lots of different tools we all have to do that. But you want to make sure that, don't say, "Okay, great, you've had all your treatments, we'll see you later, see you next year at your annual." No, you really have to make sure that, and I have so many patients, thank goodness, that are happy and go lucky. But you know what I say to patients? Like, I want to see you in April because I know that's the start of allergy season. And I am proactively seeing you in April because I want to make sure your eyes, there's no inflammation, your eyes are looking good going into the summer allergy season. Number 2, I want to see you in November because before the weather gets cold, I want to make sure there's no inflammation. So these people are not symptomatic, but they're coming in for follow-ups because of what our protocols are, and they're knowing that I care about them, and they're happy to come in. And what happens when they come in? Well, they buy a product or two here or there, or they might buy some sunglasses, or it's just another touch point. Follow-ups, we're emphasizing, even if these people are happy-go-lucky, they're off of their prescription dry drops, they're doing their ocular hygiene regimen, they know that, okay, in October, they're getting their next IPL treatment, and in this and this. So, obviously, we have these protocols. Every single patient's unique, obviously, but that's kind of how we work it. But even there's always fine-tuning to do in your practice.
It's really interesting because part of what you're talking about is not necessarily a medical protocol. You're talking about a business protocol, the scheduling,
100%,
making sure the communication takes place. I would say,
and incentivize them. Do a thing where, like, look, you spent X amount of money on this package of the 4 IRPLs, the 3 radio frequencies, the LipiFlow, the BluffX. But you know what? We really care. We know that inflammation is chronic. We want to say, look, if you will, quote unquote, pre-purchase your next 2 sessions, you get a X amount discount. You can play with the numbers however you want, but you're getting that up front and you're instituting a plan and a protocol with the patient, and they understand that.
Smart. Yeah, I just was talking to an office today about the difference between cross-selling and upselling. So cross-selling is selling something else, right? So you've sold them a tea tree oil, and now you're selling you know, a warm compress. That's cross-selling. Upselling is saying, hey, you're going to come in for four IRPLs. Let's make sure you do your 3 RFs as well. And that is basically building a bigger bundle. And I just think a lot of optometrists that you and I talk to don't necessarily think about the business component of how the medical treatment protocol aligns, but you have to have your staff thinking about what does reappointment look like? How do we get them on the schedule? How do we do all this sort of stuff? So that's a super good point.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when it comes to professional fees and stuff, I mean, you know, we've all undergone, I was listening to a podcast this morning and the doctor brought up a point that like, look, you know, you had a patient complain, they only spent 7 minutes with the patient and the bill was $250. And the doctor's like, look, you could come back 4 times if you got the guy across the street. I spent 20 years, so it only takes me 7 minutes to do this, right? So don't feel bad. Your level of professionalism, your costs to keep the lights on, your quality of care, your investment is to a point where that has to, don't say, oh, you know, all the, you know, it's not covered by insurance, let's just discount this. No, every dollar you discount is a dollar out of your practice moving forward financially, and giving your staff bonuses and keeping good staff on deck. And those things, don't devalue yourself at all.
Super good points. I'm going to change up again, unless people have questions. Please write your questions into the chat. That way I can ask them, or interrupt me and ask the question directly. So you talk a little bit about, no, that's not how I want to phrase this. All right, here's basically what I want to do. We have doctors. I'm thinking of 3 doctors right now that say, I have somebody that walks in that's just starting to show significant degradation of their meibomian glands. How do I talk to that person to help them realize that dry eye disease is serious, it's progressive, etc., compared to somebody who is already super symptomatic, i.e. their eyes hurt, they have external symptoms, etc. How do I get those early folks to go like, look, man, you got to change your behavior. You got to do some stuff today. Otherwise, you're going to end up over here in the not too distant future, and you're going to be really upset that we didn't do this.
Hardest patients to convert. But what I do is when we do the meibography, I show the image, and even like the Oculus Cartograph has a grading thing, right? And so you have the patient. What I do is I have the patient like, okay, Tom, show me where you think your glands are, right? You have the 3 pictures of the good, moderate, severe, right? Show me where you think you are. Okay, great. Okay, I'm right in between they usually say the middle one. They usually go down, actually. The middle one or the severe one. I said, right. I said, these glands do not grow back, right? I don't want to be seeing you in 3 years and the glands are almost gone and your eyes are really symptomatic and you can't wear your contacts anymore. I said, it's going to interfere with your daily life. These glands don't grow back like a starfish loses a leg and regrows. It doesn't happen with glands. So we look behind the microscope. Like one of my wife's best friends was in my office. She was my 6 o'clock patient last night. Asymptomatic, you know, probably 30–40% gland loss, telangiectasia on the lid. She wears her high water contact lenses. Her eyes don't feel dry. I said, okay, what happens on Saturday morning if you go to the grocery store and just throw your glasses on? Do you feel discomfort? Yeah, well, I hardly do that because my dryness. So the thing is that you got to put in the patient's perspective. Say, do you have any plans of retiring, you know, the next year or so? Most say no. Well, you got to remember that when we blink, this is something that is a newer thing we're seeing. We see 20-year-olds with dry eye. The lack of blinking, 70% less behind a screen, relates to just like working out. You don't work out, your muscles shrink. You don't blink, your glands fall apart. So those are things we want to do to be proactive. The reason why, and this is, I'm telling you verbatim, pretty much what I say to patients, the reason why we do a retinal picture in the back of our eyes, it's not to generate more revenue, which is an added benefit, but we say, look, we want to be proactive. If I see something in the back of your eyes, I can take care of it before it becomes a bigger problem, right? Same types of thing with the glaucoma scan, with the OCT. We can see a problem. Your pressures might be fine, but you might be losing some from nerve fiber layer. We got to watch you for glaucoma. You have to treat dry disease and ocular surface disease just like you treat glaucoma. Patients don't come in saying, oh, my eye pressure is 28 today and 27 tomorrow. They don't say that. You say, oh my gosh, your eye pressure is high. Let's treat you, right? Okay. Same thing with meibomian gland disease. your glands are falling apart. Your glands don't look good. Let's treat you. And, you know, what I learned from Selena McGee at one of our conferences we went to together, we were lecturing kind of right after each other. She said, okay, you know, these patients, all right, I'm concerned. And they're on the fence. They don't want to do this or that. Okay, here's some warm compresses. Here's an ocular hygiene kit. You try this. Let's try your way. We'll see you back in 3 months. Okay. See them back in 3 months. Oh, guess what? How'd the warm compresses go? They give you a blank stare. How'd the ocular hygiene go? Okay, we tried your way. Let's try ours. Time to start scheduling you for in-office treatment. So those are proactive things you can do. Are you going to get everybody to convert? No way. But if you can get, you know, an asymptomatic patients, you know, 60, 70%, you're hitting out of the ballpark, in my opinion.
That's a good KPI, 60 to 70% of asymptomatic. So I have a bunch more questions. One of the things that you talk about on your website is full scope medical optometry. And I think it's interesting because before I got into this space, obviously I'm married to an optometrist. I never heard anybody reference full scope or medical optometry. Like, it just isn't a thing I think about. When you think about how you grew, you talked about both Ortho-K and dry eye. From a medical perspective, what was some of the rationale that you used? And then also, like, how did you end up, you know, being this expert? Was it something that, you know, when you started, you intentionally were like, hey, I am going to go into this medical seat? Was it along the way you were like, I'm really interested in this? Like, how did you think about this?
Okay. So when I started, when I was working for a family practice, my first 6.5 years, one of the first things that I would always do, I think I just always had that mentality, to be honest with you. These patients would come in with these crappy 2-week lenses, and I'd say, oh, you know, when you sleep with, I would always try new products. If something is new, I'm a gadget guy, something new and available, I'd always try it. And so, you know, my senior doctors I was working for, they're still rubber stamping these old 2-week contacts to this. Well, I think one's retired now, but they would still be doing it to this day, right? And so I'm like, oh, well, you know, when you sleep with your contacts, your eyes get dry. Yeah. Okay, bingo. Light goes on. We're going to switch it to these night and day contacts you can actually sleep with. And so I would always try something new. So I was there for 6.5 years. I built this big practice, and thankfully I was able to, you know, move away and relatively close and be able to have a successful practice from day one. But I was always under the medical guise of, I didn't want to commoditize. I did a internship with Dr. John McGrill in St. Louis, and he's a huge medically based secondary optometric practice in St. Louis where they get referrals from ODs. That's it. And he employs ophthalmology, but they get referrals from ODs because they're doing dry eye, they're doing medical eye care, doing glaucoma. I'm like, wait a minute. If he's an OD getting referrals from other ODs, he's like, Todd, just buy this, get this. You can raise your level of care. You don't want to be, he always says, you don't want to be spitting and grinning until you're 80 years old, right? Which is better, 1 or 2, 3 or 4, right? And so you have to uncommoditize your practice. I saw the fact that, you know, everything is all these online competition and this and that and the other. We have to uncommoditize our practice, provide services the patients appreciate. Look, our practice isn't for everybody. You know, I'm sure your wife's practice isn't for everybody. We don't want to be selling to everybody. We want to have the niche of patients that appreciate our professional services, appreciate what we're providing for them. And, you know, and you know, across all income levels, we have those patients in our practice. And so I got into the medical care because of that. I wanted to be able to raise a level of care. My aunt and uncle from St. Louis, they've been seeing ophthalmologists forever. They still come up to Chicago every October for their eye exams. I'm like, why are you still coming? I mean, not that I don't like seeing them, but I'm like, why don't you like, because I've never had a more comprehensive eye exam. And so, I mean, we're not doing rocket science. We're doing visual fields, OCTs, retina photos, myographies in every patient. To me, that's standard of care, right? But unfortunately, for most of our modes of practice that some of our colleagues are in, they're not providing that, or even ophthalmologists aren't doing that. So that's kind of how I got more in tune with the medical care of things. And you know, why farm out if you went to school to train to prescribe orals and be able to treat those types of conditions if you can. But I'm the first person to refer to my fellow ODs for, you know, neurovisual behavior, binocular vision disorders, or to other specialists in the area, because, you know, I'm not a hero. I'm not a Renaissance person. I know a lot about, you know, a little about a lot of things and a lot more about certain things, but I'm happy to refer out to our colleagues for anything that patients would better serve for.
If you were talking to a 25-year-old who's getting ready to graduate from optometry school, vision of building a medical practice, but wanted to have some specialties, what would you recommend?
Look, who knows what's going to happen in 15 or 20 years in terms of what the new specialties are going to be, but you just have to uncommoditize yourself, right? I mean, you really have to steer away from the vision plans if you can, do the out-of-pocket payment, things that people are willing to pay for, and really provide value. I mean, it just drives me nuts. It probably drives a lot of other ODs who do myopia management nuts too, with these patients are in these commercial settings, their prescriptions increasing every single year. And it just, like, how could our colleagues look? Orthokeratology isn't new. It's been FDA approved since 2003. I was one of the first doctors in the area to be CRT certified back then. And how do our colleagues not refer out to somebody when you're in the best case of the patient, you know this kid's jumping up and there's something you can do about it? It just drives me nuts that patients are in their office for the first time. It's the first time they've heard about it. So, you know, those types of things are really important to kind of keep educating.
That makes sense.
But
go ahead.
you get your boots on the ground to make yourself unique.
I am going to change gears again. I'm going to ask some questions about cosmetics. And before I do, we got a question. Do you take any vision care plans?
We just take the main two vision plans. I think everybody knows what those two are. You know, I look at it as a marketing expense. It drives people into the office. But every one of those patients, Tom, is getting they're getting a retinal photo in our office regardless. That's our standard of care. And if they're not willing to do that, they can go somewhere else. We tell them we care more about the health of their eyes than, you know, their prescription. And if they're not willing to do that, then they're our patients. If those patients aren't willing to spend X amount of dollars for a retinal photo screening in our practice, then they're not going to be our dry eye patients or myopia management patients. I mean, so, right. But anyway, and they're told that by our call center ahead of time prior to scheduling the appointment if they're new off the patient. But yeah.
Makes tons of sense. So you mentioned Selena McGee earlier. She was she was the person that we had on the call in April, and she talked a lot about cosmetics and things of that nature. I'm curious about cosmetics in your practice. One of the specific questions I want to ask, well, I'll start with, do you sell any cosmetics in your practice? How do you talk to your patients about cosmetics, etc.?
So as a newly 50-year-old person, male, I never thought I'd be talking about makeup 20 years ago, but now I know more about makeup than I ever thought I would. So with the help of my associates, we do carry a couple of the makeup lines, Eyes of the Story 2020 Eyes, and we know a lot about makeup. We actually made a brochure up about the common offenders in medication and makeup, and how we talk to patients about, you know, how over 2,000 ingredients are banned in Europe and the dirty dozen in the United States. So we talk about makeup and hygiene products and how everything kind of boils together, and eyelash extensions and things like that. I always tell, you know, a lot of the doctors we consult with, you know, they want to jump into aesthetics. I'm like, no, don't jump into aesthetics until you've mastered your dry eye, or pretty darn close to that, because dry eye is the lowest hanging fruit in your office. I mean, let alone, you could just forget about outbound, you know, referrals from external doctors. You have so much sitting in your office right now. You should be, there's no reason why you shouldn't be cranking out 8 to 10 procedures a month with your patients as they are right now. There's no way, there's no reason why you shouldn't. So dial that in first, then get into the aesthetics. So your question about the aesthetics, we are actually building an aesthetic suite presently. We're expanding our office, adding another 300 square feet to it. We're in a medical building, by the way. And we're going to have a separate entrance, so it kind of looks like more posh, as they say, with, you know, nice, you know, like quote unquote spa-like. Right now we have a dry eye treatment room that's nice, and it's a smelling candle and the water, the beachfront, and all the nice massage chair and all that stuff. But we're gonna be doing aesthetics, and every state is different. And in terms of getting a medical director, check with your local state licenses about that. But we're gonna bring an esthetician in and start doing hydrofacials, and we're gonna have 2 treatment rooms, and we're gonna do those types of things with aesthetics. But I might talk to one of our oculoplastics about possibly partnering, having them do the Botox or so on and so forth. But there's lots of different things. But please do not do that in your practice until you've dialed in your dry eye, because you can't put all, you can't put all your attention in 2 places at once. And build your dry eye, make it successful, get a product line, get revenue coming in from a product line, get your flow chart nailed down, your protocols, and kind of go from there.
Cool. Sort of on a tactical level, male doctor talking to female patients, I'm assuming mostly about cosmetics. Does it get weird? And how do you make it less weird? Are there specific things where you're like, I'm just not going to talk to you about this? For example, somebody walks in and they have false eyelashes. I'm assuming you have this conversation regularly. You have a ton of mites. You have, fill in the blank. How do you do that in a way that to the female patient? Because still more male doctors than female doctors, although the last 20 years is starting to balance that out. Good.
Yeah, sure.
So how do you talk to female doctors or female patients about cosmetics, false eyelashes, etc.?
You know what? I have some of my best conversations in my exam are behind the microscope, right? When I'm looking behind the microscope, you get truthful answers while they're sitting there. You take the images, you talk about the, then you take the images, show them that it's, so terrible. This is where your glands empty out and you're covering with this black eyeliner. It's not your recipe for success. You're killing your glands. Put on the other side of the eyelashes. And we talk about but the slit lamp cameras go well and kind of is a natural lead in from the ocular health perspective of that. And then by and large, when they're having dry treatments, or I will, I'll give our staff is all incentivized based upon, revenue growth on a monthly basis. We have different quarterly targets, and I'll have, we have 4 people in our office that do a lot of the treatments. And so they will, I'll bring them in and do the conversations with the patient about the makeup lines or so on and so forth as a female, but I'll just talk about the ingredients and I'll talk about the hygiene. I'll talk about the gland loss and talk about the mites and those types of things. I kind of always joke. I'm like, is it eyeliner or mascara? I always get confused and they always laugh and stuff. But, so that kind of approach.
Makes sense. A couple questions. Patients have asked about the plug-in warm compresses. The person writing is hesitant because sometimes they could malfunction or cause burns. What do you think about electric plug-in warm compresses?
The way whether it's the microwavable or the electrical plug-in ones, right, it can cause burns, obviously, but obviously if the lids are inflamed, you don't want to do hot, and patients don't know that necessarily. But what I tell patients, look, warm compresses are basically holding a candle to a match far away. You'll soften the oil, but you're not going to melt it. When you tell patients, look, the glands are located on the back of the eyelids, really. And in order to melt the oil, to go through the skin, the muscles, it has to be about 300 degrees external heat to melt the oil. And so then I said, yeah, a warm compress, whether it's a plug-in or a microwavable, it'll make your eyes symptomatically feel better for a little bit. But an hour later, the glands are solid. It's like coconut oil, right? You melt it and then it becomes solid white after half hour again. And so it might symptomatically help if you massage it a little bit here and there, but it doesn't work. And warm compresses are a nice adjunct, but they're no treatment to establish gland refunctioning of the meibum and things like that.
Another question, do you recommend specific skincare products after the IPL or RF treatments? Do you sell those in your office? If so, do you bundle them into the treatment cost? So do they pay as part of receiving the treatment?
We're just starting with that enhanced line, the one that Selena kind of recommended. We're waiting, though. They have a tinted serum, but a lot of men don't want that, or people with lighter skin don't necessarily want it all the time. So we're still looking actively into that. Right now, we do not package it. We do sell, I forgot the name of it, but a really good post-IRPL sunscreen with zinc, and it's SPF 30 with zinc. I forgot the name right now, but we do sell that, and we apply it for the patients before they leave, and things like that. But we don't package it. It might be a good idea. What we do, every single patient that gets a dry eye treatment in our office, they get a warm compress. No, they don't get a warm compress. They get lid wipes. They get preservative-free tears, and they get a spray, as well as some nice dark chocolates from our local chocolatier in Long Grove.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a little earlier your recall process. Do you have a compliance process? So somebody walks out, you want them to be doing eyelid hygiene, you want them to be using a warm compress. Do you have a process for the next, call it 30, 60, 90 days in between visits? And
That is a fair, no, but we should. We do. I mean, we use like Hoot Dry Eyes for a lot. We put everybody in the funnel. So if they haven't, if we did the ocular surface exam, as we call it in our office, and they haven't come in 2 or 3 months to follow through with treatment, even though we've given them the spiel and all the paperwork, we'll reactivate them through Hoots. We send them all the information, the digital marketing and all the drip marketing that way. But in terms of compliance, we don't. We try to sell them as much as we can in the office, but we say, here's a website to go to buy stuff down the road. But typically we're touching these patients several times a year. We'll see them back in several months, and then we make sure we get all the appointments scheduled. So even if a patient comes in for an ocular surface exam, I'm putting them on like Regenerize per se and some steroids. I'm seeing them back in 3 weeks, but at that 3-week appointment, most will be starting their dry eye treatments at that point and they'll start the protocols. But I want to see people 6 weeks into Regenerize, so we'll get another appointment from 6 weeks from the ocular surface exam. It's a lot of appointments, but we make notes in the chart to reason why. But in terms of compliance, no. I mean, I don't know a way to do it in which unless you do auto ship or through your company or something to automatically ensure that. Because I got a patient the other day with this blepharitis, same stuff as last year. She's like, oh, I still got the bottle at home. I'm like, dude, that bottle's dead and gone. That's skunk. It's like skunked out beer from a year ago. It's not gonna put any water in your eyes. And so that would be a really great thing to institute.
I feel like I have to say this because you're on our call. That is what Peeq does. So I'll just table that. That is not an attempt to sell you. It's just, it feels, yes, we really, that's our focus, the 30 to 90 days of getting people to actually clean their lids and do whatever the protocol is. Anyway, sorry, I was not trying to say that. I wasn't setting you up. I was just
no. I'd like to table that because I'd like to discuss post-mortem of this call so we can discuss that more.
Great. So I'm gonna sort of ask that question. I'm gonna ask a follow-up question, and it is not intended to continue. It's just we had one more question on compliance. Sure. That is sort of our standard thing. Yep. So when people fail, so like one of the things you intimated earlier was what Selena said about the idea of like, we'll do it your way for 3 months and we'll see how you do. Oh, you failed. How do you talk to people after they haven't been compliant? And then what are changes that have ultimately led to some better compliance? Is it, some of what I see, and this is me just speaking, but I hope you either disagree or say this is right, is frequently people will get a kit that is a compliance kit and they won't do anything with it. They won't reorder the products. They won't show back up for their 6-week visit because they will have gone because they had allergies and the allergies are gone. And so they're feeling fine, even though the underlying problem's gone. The underlying problem's still there. I'm sorry. How do you handle sort of non-compliance when they return and say, yeah, still hurts. Yeah, I still have blepharitis. Yeah, fill in the blank of whatever that is. What is your process for dealing with sort of non-compliant patients and trying to change that behavior?
So what we do is, we just kind of show the pictures and we, really educate about the disease process. And, I'll show them some gross pictures of styes and things like that. I'm like, believe me, you don't want to have this. And, by having glands that are clogged, it's not a matter of if, it's when you're going to be back in my office that you got a big old bump on your eyelid. And so, it's tough though. It's like you try to educate, some of these, I have this patient of mine, his eyelids are, and he's actually using the Peeq Pro, which is awesome. It's done really wonders from him. Again, not a commercial, but it actually worked. He's my first patient I gave it to. But he was still asymptomatic and his eyelids look disgusting. I mean, like disgusting. And so he's really compliant because he's a teenager and cares about his looks now that I pointed out to him. But, it's just tough. I mean, it's just, you just show them the gross pictures of the styes and just say, look, it's disease and you're further deteriorating something. It's like you're doing something unhealthy concurrently. They're not helping anything. You're only going to make the problem worse down the road. It's hard, especially with those asymptomatic patients where you're telling them you're going to be back. It's going to be bad. And it's just, I wish I had the magic beans to give you to make your practice grow in that way, but it's tough. I don't know if you have any pearls, I'm open to them too, that Cheryl's come up with, because it's really hard.
I would say it is, so we sell care kits at Peeq. So when we have a scleral patient compliance, so reorder within 35 to 45 days, is between 80 and 90%. On dry eye, it's about 6%. And we would look at that and say they're not exhausting whatever you gave them in your office. So whether that's hypochlorous or, we at some level don't really care what you are selling. And I would say that is the number one issue that we project. Part of the reason our business exists, frankly, is 20 years from now, all these people at 6% are going to have horrible dry eye, and they're going to be like, I need all the things. So, they're all going to be washing their lids. Everybody's going to be, because people are so, they aren't doing what they should be doing. All right. We're going to go one more time. I got 2 questions. Question number 1 is there anything else about your practice or stuff that you see that you think everyone should know? And thing number 2 is, how can we help you? Is there anything that you would like from the people who are going to watch this video?
For one, just really institute a nice protocol in your practice. Be that distinguishing practice. Do myography. You can't catch what you can't see. That at least is the baseline to start screening patients. We instituted it. Every single contact lens patient, we have a 90% daily disposables practice, gets myography. We bundled it into our contact lens fitting fee. So we're able to get it. And so that just is an importance, because you're really educating the patient. Like, look, I want to keep you happy, healthy with your contact lenses, and we're not going to be able to do that unless you've got a stable ocular surface, and the glands are 86% of that, right? So that's a big thing. And, in terms of, I would like to, have that offline call about protocols in terms of recurring ordering for patients and partnering with Peeq. But I have a company called Orbital Healthcare Solutions. The website's kind of still in its infancy, but we really help doctors, and we have different packages, quick start packages, and those types of practices to really get patients up and running. I partnered, my friend's a CFO with the company, and we also have one of the former national trainers of J&J LipiFlow, and she's amazing at staff implementation and training and working with the verbiage and things like that. So she's really great to kind of tackle that, because if you don't have staff buy-in, you don't have your practice buy-in. And so we do consulting in terms of that. But I just love educating patients and doctors, our colleagues, to raise the level of care, because it's really important that it becomes mainstream. Not everyone's going to do it, but those practices that do it will be professionally and obviously financially rewarded. I've always looked at myself as an entrepreneur who happens to be an optometrist, and that's the way that you really need to practice and keep developing and keep growing, and those types of things, whether it's myopia management or dry eye or sclerals, or pick a couple lanes and excel. Neurovisual disorders, pick a couple lanes and really try to excel in those, because in my opinion, I'd rather see 10 dry eye patients a day than 30 vision care patients a day. But everyone, to each their own. And thankfully in optometry, there's 31 flavors of ice cream. There's for a reason, because there's lots of different modalities to practice. But work with your referring doctors, and kind of put it in their perspective that what's in it for them isn't just what's in it, is a mutually beneficial for everybody. So
awesome. Dr. Cohan, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
My pleasure.
I want to thank everybody who watches this video for listening. This is not an infomercial for Peeq, despite us kind of going off the rails a couple times. This is really our attempt at trying to answer some of the questions that we hear frequently out when we're talking to customers or potential customers. So we were happy that Dr. Cohan, an expert in dry eye, could come and share some of his deep insights into dry eye and dry eye protocols. So thank you. Great job.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.